This is the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Hi, good evening, and welcome to the latest edition of the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. I am your host, Eric Balkman. You know me from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and the Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Connect with me on the X at Eric Balkman. Connect with the FFPC on X at FFPC. Want to welcome you all to the March 2025 edition of this show. As a reminder, this program airs on the first Tuesday of every month in the off season. And then during the NFL season, once the actual playing gets going, we go weekly on Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock. So we will be monthly until then. And this is the March edition of it. Before we get into the show, I do want to remind you that some of the content that we're producing tonight, which we'll hear from our guest, who is really going to share a lot of insight on how he's been so successful, not only this past year, but over the course of his career in the FFPC. You can put that content to good use. We have plenty of FFPC Dynasty orphans at myffpc.com. You can go to that website, click on the Dynasty Orphan link, and it'll bring a list of all the teams that we have up there. Some are as little as $1 right now. Some are more than that, but they've all got great deals. There's a lot of good teams. As a reminder, we've been doing Dynasty in the FFPC for 15 years now, nearly 1,900 teams, and not a single league has ever folded. So once you're playing Dynasty with the FFPC, you know you're in it for the long haul. You don't have to worry about the league folding or any of that. While you're there, you can also enter the FFPC Never-Too-Early Best Ball Tournament and the Never-Too-Early Superflex Best Ball Tournaments. Those have an entry fee of $125 and $35 respectively. $40,000 in the Never-Too-Early tournament for the grand prize, $10,000 grand prize for the Never-Too-Early Superflex. Those tournaments are going, or those drafts are going to go through April 24th. That's when we cut off drafts. That's the first day of the NFL draft. And then that tournament will be locked and loaded for the season. You can draft with a 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clock. myffpc.com is ready to go for that. And the newest addition to the lineup of what we have going for you here in March is the Big Gorilla Tournament, a $1 million grand prize, $350 entry fee. You get a 3-pack for a $50 discount. Drafts are already running now, live and slow. The Early Rampage and the 7 Bananas promos are live. Check it out at myffpc.com. The Early Rampage, it's basically an extra tournament that you get in for free if you enter in now. In the 7 Bananas promo, you're going to get a lot of free stuff if you get the 7 picks so many times in a row, including all the way up to a jungle safari for 4. myffpc.com is ready to go for that. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live. More on that coming up later on in the show. I'll welcome in my guest tonight. He is a guy who last year alone won 10 high-stakes leagues, including several Dynasty Leagues as well in the FFPC. No stranger to Dynasty League titles. He's won a boatload of them over the years. Please welcome back onto these airwaves. You follow him on the X at Bill Wanke. Please welcome in Mr. Bill Wanke. Bill, welcome back to the show, man. Good to see you.
Hey, Wanke. Good to see you, man.
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's so good to have you on too. You're one of those, I don't want to say rare guests, but you're one of the guests that we have. I could have you on in February. I could have you on in August. I could have you on in November, because you do it all at the FFPC. You're playing Dynasty, you're playing tournaments, you're playing all these different things. And I should start off at the top. You started off as a redraft player and then you added Dynasty to your repertoire after that?
Yeah. Hey, first, let me just say, I really want to be like on your show in January after having hit something. Yeah. Like I want to be the main event winner, or I want it. So like, I'm hoping for that one is the one I want. Yeah.
Right. And to listen, you've been successful. You've had it only takes,
you got to take the swings.
You got to take the swings. You got to take the swings. Indeed, we're going to take a few swings tonight at trying to figure out what we need to do as good dynasty fantasy football owners. I obviously don't play in the FFPC since I'm an employee, but I'm going to use a lot of the stuff that you are telling me and the viewers tonight about how to be a better dynasty owner. And I think that the thing we could start off with is to let everyone know this is sort of I don't want to say a Dynasty 401 show, maybe Dynasty 201, because we're going to get into some stuff that's a little bit beyond, your basic dynasty stuff. And some of it maybe is a little bit more basic. But I want to kick things off right now with, obviously everybody's talking about rookies. We just got done with the NFL draft combine. Everybody's getting amped up for the NFL draft, which is about 7+ weeks away. At this point in the offseason, Bill, how do you feel about all those rookie picks that you have in your leagues, your first rounders, your second rounders, third rounders, so on and so forth? Are they overrated? Are you trying to acquire them? And I guess if you think they're overrated, when's the best time to deal them? And if you're trying to acquire them, when do you find out, or when do you feel like you're getting the best price for them?
Yeah. So, I mean, like this time of year, like basically all we have to talk about, right, is like the rookies and then the combine and then like whatever else. And free agency start like next week or something like that. So that's all we have. The important thing about rookies, though, is the rookie draft is to remember like the two most important things we don't know. Like we don't know draft capital, we don't know landing spot, right? And those are by far and away the most important things. So right now what we have is like talent evaluation and like we get like production analytics and stuff like that. But we don't really have the most important things. That said, like I feel really good about the class. Like I think the narrative has kind of been a little bit, this class isn't as strong as like last year's class, but I don't think that's the case. I think when you look at overall the strength of the class, it's there. Like to me, we're talking a lot more about a lot more guys and their skill level and their like college projection than we were last year. Like last year's conversation was about a handful of guys, right? We talked about Caleb and Marvin Harrison and Brock Bowers and Rome and Neighbors, right? And like that was pretty much it. And then after that, like, yeah, like Worthy lit up the combine, but like a lot of guys were like not really getting much talk. This year, I think it's different. There are a lot more guys being talked about. So I think the difference with this class is it's like flatter. It's deeper and flatter. Like last year was skewed. There was like 4 or 5 guys you really wanted. But then after that, it was kind of like, hey, I don't know. And it's like a memory refresh. Like it's always like hindsight bias is always pretty powerful. Like a year ago, like if you right now, it's easy to say, hey, I knew that Brian Thomas Jr. was going to smash. I knew Ladd McConkey was going to smash. Like I knew Xavier Worthy was going to smash. If you did, congratulations on being on Balky's January show because you won the Millie. Because Brian Thomas was going wide receiver 43, like he was going wide receiver 43 in like the FFPC, like literally behind Zamir White, right? Like that's where he was going, right? Ladd McConkey was going wide receiver 52. So like at this time of year, like those guys were nothing. Like now, by the time we got to rookie drafts, we were taking them in the first because of draft capital and landing spot. But like at this time, we didn't really have much. This year, I think there were a lot more guys like, and I'm not a take pro, like I don't study the tape. I don't do any analytics stuff. But just if you listen to the conversation, there's a lot more names. And so like, if you just look at the strength of the overall class last year, like if you look, you can listen to the narratives, but I'd rather look at what the money is doing. And like, if you look at the Big Gorilla versus the Fantasy Pros last year, you got the same number of rookies going in the top 12 rounds. Like, and I kind of picked 12 because after that, it's basically dart throws. You're pretty much like taking swings at guys randomly. But like, if you're spending before a 12th round, and this year before the 8th round, we get 9 guys going off. Last year we had 5, right? So there's a big difference in terms of the depth of guys, which to me says like by the time we get to rookie draft time, like where last year the rookie draft tiers were really pretty clear. Like if you were in 1 QB, there was like the first 4 because you had like Marv, Neighbors, Rome, and Bowers, right, in some order that you liked. And then after that, you had other guys. This year, you got Genty, and then after that, like it's a pretty even keel. Like like do you prefer Ted or like do you like the two, like, do you want Travian Henderson? Like, which of those guys do you prefer, and who will really like come that time? I don't know. So to me, like, it's like, yeah, it's Genty, and then after that, I don't know. So like, if some guy wants, so like, what can you do today? Like, if some guy wants to come to me and like trade up from the 109 to the 105 for something, I'll talk to him about it. Like last year, like if you wanted to trade from the 108 to the 104, like wasn't happening. Like, but this year, yeah, let's do it. And like any of the seconds, especially the early seconds, there's going to be good running backs sitting there. Like, so if you need running backs, which I always do, because I tend to build like zero or hero, and like I need running backs, there should be a bunch of interesting guys showing up in the late first, early second that you're going to be happy to roster. Like, you think back to last year, like we ended up drooling over guys like, Kamani Vidal, because there wasn't really much in the way of talent.
We were starved for talent. Yeah. And
then the guy lands on the Chargers, and you go, well, Jesus, of course this guy's got to be a hit, right? It's got to be a hit. Like, so yeah, I got to get me some Kamani Vidal. But like, this year I think there's going to be a lot more guys that are better prospects than they were last year. Last year there weren't that many prospects, and then we just had to bet on draft capital and landing spot. This year I think we get to bet more on like the actual talent. So to me, the thing, like the class is deeper, and like it really fits me better personally, to be honest, because like I need RBs generally, and my picks are late. Like, that's the humble brag, right? But like my picks tend to be late. So like there's there's going to be talent deep, I think, where last year that really wasn't the case. If you missed out on the top 8 guys last year, it got pretty sketchy if you were drafting in one QB at like the 11 or 12.
Did you find yourself last year trying to trade up into that top 4 in single quarterback dynasty leagues? Because obviously, like you said, you're usually drafting at the back end. Did you find yourself trying to trade up to get one of those elite pieces?
So I think I mentioned, like, so last year was my like premier premier is in first time dynasty. So I grabbed like about 15 orphans. So I tried to get a variety of draft capital spots. So I had a bunch of like 102s and 104s, and I actually had a couple 101s and Superflex, and then I had a bunch of like random ones. So I did like a little bit of moving up. Like, I traded up in one spot to go grab. I wanted Rome on a team that I didn't have, so I traded up and swapped like first, second, and 20, future first for second to move up from like the 109 to the 105, I think, or 106 to get Rome. So like, so I did some of that, but like not a lot last year, because I was also last year's one, Ladd, Jonathan Brooks, were all sitting there. Like, so or Brian Thomas Jr., you got one of those guys if you were sitting there. If you got to the 10 or 11 and you were thinking about Keon Coleman or whoever else is going back there at the end, it was like, oh man. But
going forward this year, I happen to agree with you that there's still going to be some pretty good value, especially with running backs early in the second round. Do you think now is the time to like, hey, let's turn this 108 into a couple of early second round picks, like the 201 and the 203? Let's turn this 110 into the 201 and 205. Do you feel like now is the time to do that? Do you want to see what happens in the NFL draft before you start making moves like that? We know the talent's there, obviously landing spot and draft capital, quite frankly, is going to change the way we feel about certain players, though.
So like the specific ones you mentioned, 100% I would be looking to do that. Like, if I could turn the 110 into the 202 and the 205, yeah, like to me, that would be just like a no-brainer. Like, I would smash that. It may calc out pretty reasonably, but like I would like absolutely smash that, because like, I don't know who all these guys are, but to me, they're all kind of be the same archetype. There'll be a guy that like is going to have to earn his way onto the field, and if he does, maybe he's something. And so to me, like, once you kind of get to that part of the draft, they'll all be the same. Hey, one other thing about the draft, like the rookie class, like people are talking like, the wide receivers are really like not that good. I don't know that that's true either. Like, quarterback is not good. That's pretty clear, right? Quarterback is not the same. But like, two of the guys, like Burden and Buka, and I apologize to his family if I'm mispronounce his names, like they're literally going at the same places that like Brian Thomas Jr. was going last year this time. So like, from a production profile point of view, which is all we have to go on, they're like equivalent. And so like there's like 5 guys for sure that are going to be worth, grabbing if you need a wide receiver. And by the time we get to the draft, we might find out that there's a couple more once like we see where they go. So it's not like people are saying like wide receiver blows, but like it's just like, yeah, there's not Marvin Harrison, there's not Neighbors, there's not Roan. That's true. But like after that, like it's not that different.
I wonder if it's just simply recency bias, where we're comparing it to just last year.
Yeah.
And obviously, Odunze didn't have the greatest season, but I know there's plenty of people that are expecting a big leap forward. Same thing can be said with Harrison, and then we know that Neighbors and Thomas are just studs.
Exactly.
And I just don't think that we have that top end. Like even McMillan, I don't know how you feel about Tet McMillan. Like I'm not sold on that guy. I've been doing the high stakes fantasy football show on the Better Sports Network like the last 4 weeks. I think I've asked my guest co-host to try to sell me on McMillan, and all of them have put up decent arguments. I still have not and by the way, I'll say this too. I have the 102 in I think one league right now. I'd have to look at and back on it. I'm assuming Genty goes number one. It's a single quarterback league, Bill. Like after the combine, I might be, and I feel like I'm not overrating Omari and Hampton, but Hampton looked really good at the combine. Yeah. And from what some people were saying there, who were talking to NFL scouts, that this guy might be on the same level as Genty. In fact, some teams reportedly had him higher than Genty too. So like at this point, man, I think Omari and Hampton is getting much more cemented for me at the 102 over McMillan. And I guess this drives home my point of like, I think the receivers this year are not as top heavy, but to your point, I think there's still some producers here that you'll be able to get in the first and early second rounds too in your rookie drafts.
Yeah, just like I completely agree with you. Like if I have a 102, I don't think I do have one, but if I had a 102, like, yeah, I'd be taking Hampton. But the thing to remember is just that like some of these guys like Tet and like these other guys, last year, this time we didn't think Ladd McConkey was much, Xavier Worthy wasn't much, right? Like they just, at this point in the time, they just weren't that much. But like if Tet goes off, 10th or 8th somewhere to like a wide receiver needy team, like you're going to like them.
Yeah.
Right?
I would. Because at that point, you have not only the draft capital, but the opportunity, like
exactly,
everything is going that way. And like, so talent is important, obviously, but the draft capital and opportunity, like regardless of how I feel about McMillan, I got to like him quite a bit at that point there. I can't remember who was talking about this the other day. I was listening to a podcast and somebody mentioned how there's been so much stuff about rookies lately. It's all about rookies. They just wanted to get back and do a show with veterans, right? And just talk about veterans. Now we're going to talk about a few specific veterans in the program tonight, but wide scope it. Let's just give you, get you to talk about how you like to treat them in Dynasty. 2 years ago, I beg your pardon. I was going to try to, and I think I failed in doing this because I just didn't have the time. But all my running backs that were coming into their age 27 season, I was going to float them out there, difference-making running backs, not just any run-of-the-mill running back that I had that was 27. I was going to float trades out there and see if I could get a first-round pick for them. So I wouldn't be the bag holder. I'd probably be selling a year early, but at least I get a first-round pick and see what happens on that. I was only successful in one league. I was successful in 0 leagues 2 years ago. I was successful in one league last year where I was able to flip Joe Mixon for Trey Benson. And obviously, it didn't work out good last year, but we'll see what happens this year. I don't know if I'm going to take that approach again this year. I don't know if it's maybe a waste of time. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Do you have a single set age for a player, just player position, where you're like, okay, now's the time to start shopping this guy? I will take less than 100 cents on the dollar for him because I know the pick or the younger player, essentially, that I'm getting for him, that's going to be an ascending asset where I know that the running back, age 27 running back, just for an example, is going to be a descending asset. Do you have anything like that? Do you ever do anything like that?
So I would say, like, no, I don't have that hard rule. Like the way I would look at it, I think, though, maybe a little different is, a lot of times we like kind of talk about, or like people talk about like, the age cliff and like things like that. And the reality is that's just like for individuals, that's not how it looks. Like, unfortunately for people who are just listening, they don't see my finger wave. Like, you like to think like it's a slow decline over a period of years. Like, and on average, across dozens of running backs or hundreds of running backs, it looks that way. But the reality is, no, it's an individual game. And a guy's step functions down. And once he loses a step, he's basically done, right? But like the other guys continue on and they still look fine, right? So I don't bother to go try to do that, like in general, because I don't know which of the guys is going to like fall off his personal cliff and which ones will move forward. And most of the time, your league mates are smart enough. They don't want to pay for an aging guy. They're not going to pay up. And so it's the guy's always worth more to you on your roster from a production point of view than the capital you'll get. Now that's if you're contending, right? If you're in some form of contending. If your team was a pure rebuild, yeah, swapping out Mixon for Benson makes like perfect sense, right? It's like, I'm taking the upside running back. Like, I don't really want the production at running back now. Like, why would I hold on to that, on my roster? And whether that works or doesn't work, I still think the process was fine. If you were contending, I'd say, I don't like, I wouldn't look to have shopped him. I would just say he's worth more to me than he's going to be worth to anybody else. And I know he'll die on my roster. That's okay. Some of the guys are going to die on my roster.
Right. Okay.
And I guess, Bulky, the other thing I'd say is like, the thing I'm really more inclined is when I look at the age is when I'm going to buy something. Like if I'm going to go trade for a guy, I'm not going to spend future like draft capital for an aging guy, right? Like, people will do that, right? They'll trade like a future first. They think they're going to contend. They'll trade a future first for a guy that's like, kind of approaching the theoretical, at least the average age cliff. And it's like, man, I hope you hit it. Like, because if you don't, like, you're really in a bad spot. So like, I'm usually just more cautious about the age of a player. If like I'm spending elite capital for him, that would be the difference for me.
So somebody like, we'll use Alvin Kamara as an example, or I guess you could use Travis Kelce at another position here. If you have those guys in your roster, Bill, you're not going out and shopping them around, right? You're comfortable having them on your team, unless, again, as you said, unless you're rebuilding.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm rebuilding, I'm looking to try to move them, right? But like, if you go to the market right now and try to sell Alvin Kamara, like, what is he going for on KTC? He's probably like RB40 or something. I mean, like maybe he's not that far down. But
he was one. I'll tell you this, Bill. He was one of the guys I tried to do this with last year, and I couldn't find fair value for him. So
exactly. Yeah. So he's really not worth anything to another guy. Like at least at this juncture, right? If it turns out like miracle of miracles, the Saints don't draft anybody. Kendry Miller still remains dust, and Kamara is getting 10 targets a game. Like come week 8, you may be able to move him for something to somebody who like needs a running back and needs the production. So in season, maybe you have a shot, but like right now, yeah, I don't think you have a shot.
You can do it, but you're going to be taking quite a bit of hit on the exchange. Like you're just not going to get, to your point, you're not going to get fair value for it. If you're contending, you're better off keeping him. Okay, let's continue this conversation with the back end of your dynasty rosters. Now, dynasty and redraft, as we both know, as the viewers know, it's very different. However, I think I play the last I don't know, 3 or 4 spots on my roster similar. I usually am reserving it for running backs. For redraft, I'm reserving for running backs because, like you, I like to do hero RB, where I'm counting on 1 or 2 guys, and then loading it up with guys who are just an injury away type player. In Dynasty, I tend to be top heavy at wide receiver on my rosters. I typically don't like to roster wide receivers that are going to top out as a number 2, like a number 2 receiver on their. I want the elite talent, and I feel like if you do it right, you can get a lot of elite talent at wide receiver. And if you have a lot of elite talent at wide receiver, chances are you may not have it at other positions. For me, that's usually running back. And like you, I'm always craving running backs on Dynasty and redraft. How much do you try to stock your roster in Dynasty and in during the season in Dynasty and the offseason with running backs, knowing that sometimes these guys are good enough that all they need is the opportunity, like Jordan Mason, Guerrero last year is another good example. These guys are probably only going to pay off for like maybe a 2 or 3 week window, but that 2 or 3 week window could be the fantasy playoffs. It could be a window where it gets you into the fantasy playoffs where these guys can really carry you. This is a leading question. I think you and I are of the same mind here, but I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, no. We're 100% in the same mind. Like I'm not spending a lot of, like, if I have my perfect roster, I ended up actually getting an orphan this year, was like literally the perfect roster for me. It was 5 stud wide receivers, Josh Allen, Sam Laporta, and literally dust.
No running
back. I mean, literally dust. And though, hang on, the 101, the 202, the 203, and the 205. I'm like, I saw this guy. I was like, oh my God, this is, and the 5 wide receivers, 2 of them were guys that I was targeting to get more of because I was way underweight and not at all pleased about that. And I'm thinking, this is perfect. So that, to me, that is the dream lineup, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got 5 stud wide receivers, and I think actually there was a 6th. I think it was like a crazy upside guy like Jalen Coker or something like that, just like a complete upside dart, and then basically dust it running back, and I'm going to restock it and let's go. And like, I got Josh Allen and I got Sam Laporta, and like, we're set.
What did you end up doing if you had all those stud receivers and you had the 101 and the 102 on this time?
Okay. Yeah. This is an orphan. I bought this guy. Yeah. Somebody didn't want him. I don't know. Like, I understand.
So then when you had all those receivers, what did you do with those top picks, knowing that it was usually Harrison and Neighbors going at the 101, 102?
Oh, like I said, I got this orphan this year. Like, I just bought this guy. So this
now I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
So my God, you have these 6 receivers: Laporta, Allen, and probably Genty and Hampton if you want it. This is
Yeah, so it was literally.
Bill, I think we've already said you're going to be on a January show now. This is.
Yeah, for a Dynasty League. but I tried to build exactly the way you do. It's like, I'm gonna like hold on to a couple. Like, if I can get an elite running back or 2, great. But otherwise, I'm planning on churning those guys. Like, yeah, that's the plan. I'm gonna get as strong a wide receiver group. Try to get an elite onesie if I can get them. Trade to kind of get those guys. Like last year, I was trading to try to get Josh Allen. Like, because that was still possible in 1 QB leagues, not possible in Superflex, but it was possible in 1 QB leagues. So I would trade to go get Josh Allen. Like, people really love having running backs. Like, so like, you can trade them.
I think as long as we're talking about running backs, let's keep it on that subject. We talked about how loaded this running back class is. Pretty good at the top and deep too. So if you have these veteran running backs on your squad, these guys that are, 3-4 years deep in the league, how nervous are you about, man, this guy could turn into nothing if I'll use this as an example. I was doing a live terrestrial radio show during and I can't remember which draft this was. It was the draft where Trevor Lawrence went 1 overall to Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I don't remember what year it was, but you know what I'm talking about. I had James Robinson on a few dynasty teams, and they took Lawrence. They had another first-round pick. I'm like, okay, should be good to go here. They'll take a defender, maybe a receiver that Lawrence can throw to, and they took Travis Etienne, and I lost it because all of a sudden Robinson went from like a top 5 dynasty running back to, I don't know, like top 20, top 25, maybe. I was just crushed. And I think that's an extreme example. But we could see stuff like that happen this year, Bill. Like we could see, whoever Hampton or Henderson or Judkins or, any of these guys, Caleb Johnson, they could go to a team and quite frankly, be the first and second down guy or first, second and third down guy. And then the incumbent there or a guy that, was already going to be in a bad situation, because they were going to add somebody. They're even in a worse situation because now we're talking about day 2 draft capital on this. Knowing that you have players like this on your team, is it something that you would be willing to shop around, or is the juice not worth the squeeze? Because everybody knows this and nobody wants to I feel like, it's landmines. Like nobody wants to be acquiring potential landmines right now. They're just trying to avoid them. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe you do what you can to pawn these guys off. I don't know what the right approach is here.
So Walke, I'll tell you, I think you said we could see that this year. Like, I'm not a man of certainty, but like, I 100% guarantee we will see that this year. The thing is, we just don't know which team yet, but like, or which teams. Like, my view of it is like, if your running backs are not named like Jameer, Bijan, or Saquon, you should be nervous. Like, I'm not kidding.
Yeah,
I'm not kidding.
I get it. I get it.
Like I know people didn't. I'm sure like people in the chat or something like, oh come on, there's no way. Like Devin Achane. It's like, oh yeah, baby. What do you think? Mike McDaniel like was happy with not making the playoffs last year, and he wants to just run it back like on an inefficient rushing game, throwing the ball to Devin Achane. Like, no, it isn't going to be that. Like, will that definitely happen? I have no idea. But like, is there a risk of that? You bet. And do I want to pay RB4 price for Devin Achane? I have him. I like him. He's fun. Like, I'm not going to give him away. Like, I'm not trading him away for less than value. But like, would I be shocked if he turns to dust? No. Kamara, Mixon, any of those guys, like literally could turn to almost virtual dust in like at the draft. So to me, like, I'm not acquiring any of those guys at fair value. Like, just no way. Like, Gibbs, Bijan, Saquon, nobody's trading them anyway. But like, those guys you could trade for fair value, but you could buy for fair value if you could. But the rest of the guys, I won't touch. Like, I'm not doing anything. After the cut down and after the draft, if I find myself like missing somebody, but like an Aaron Jones lands in a good spot and like somebody's willing to trade him for a fair price, sure. Like, I'll stock my roster with guys once we know where everybody's landed. But until then, I think people are crazy with the prices that are going right now for like the RBs.
What about Barney Newkirk watching us on Facebook tonight? He wants to know, what about King Henry? Now, we don't have startup data for FFPC leagues because we haven't had startup Dynasty leagues yet this year. So I'll look at the Never-Too-Early Best Ball Tournament. Shout out to Fantasy Mojo. Darren Armani, who runs the pros shows. Anytime we cite ADP or anything like that on the show, it's a shout out to him. Does great work. So this is redraft. So I'll just point that out right now. Derrick Henry is still being drafted at the 1-2 turn. Running back 4. If you have Henry in Dynasty and you see, oh, this is how people are treating him this year, you probably feel warm and cozy. But if you're Bill Wanke, you're like, I'm not feeling warm and cozy.
So in fairness, Barney points out the good spot. Like Henry's kind of like a tweener type guy because, is somebody coming in and taking on that role? No, like nobody's like, he's a role-based unicorn. Like, nobody's taking that. However, like, are they going to do something and maybe get it back that like they have to do something too, right? I think one thing, Bulky, I think for us always to remind ourselves is that like most of these where guys are rated and where like what the values are in KTC or like even where people are drafting them is like an extrapolation of what we saw last year and kind of like our present, right? It's really hard to project like the fact that the world will be different. Like Baltimore is going to do something different. Like, they are not going to run it back the way they did it because it didn't work. Like, the Eagles might, but nobody else is. Like, nobody else is going to like just run it back. So to me, I think the risk for Henry is not that somebody like takes the Henry role that's better than Henry. It's more like they get somebody better than Justice Hill. They decide they need to throw the ball more. Like that, they change how many things he sees. So his usage pattern changes. Not so much that like he turns to dust, but more like that role isn't as strong as the role was this year.
That's exactly my feelings on it is I think you could see Baltimore going one of 3 directions. One, they just ignore the position, which they may or may not do. 2, they could draft a guy that is on day 2 that is a better pass catcher, that takes away more third down work, maybe works in to first and second down on a couple of series during the game. Or they could be drafting the next Derrick Henry. They draft Caleb Johnson. They draft not Hampton, but Judkins or something like that, or Henderson. And then all of a sudden we're like, okay, the clock's ticking on Derrick Henry at this point. Again, probably not going to affect him much, if at all, in 2025. But after that, and we're year to year in Dynasty anyway, Bill, because so much stuff changes.
Yeah. So I have like a couple of Derrick Henry shares. So if my league mates see this, like, yeah, don't come like offer me like dog shit for Henry because I'm not moving him. But am I like looking to go pay the market price for him? Yeah, no, I'm not.
I want to talk about another backfield that I think you talked about without really talking about it when you talked about if you have Barkley, if you have Robinson, if you have Gibbs, you feel pretty good about it. Anybody else, anything could happen in the NFL draft, and quite frankly, free agency, which we're on the cusp of. One of the situations that we thought we were going to be okay with was Breece Hall's in New York. And then last year comes. Here's the thing. Breece Hall was considered in redraft leagues as a potential 101. In fact, he did go 101 in a few leagues. First full year coming off the ACL. Aaron Rodgers is back. A lot of good feelings in New York. It's going to be defense, and Breece Hall is going to lead this great ground game. What happens? Offense left a lot to be desired. Hall had a few spike weeks, and then Braylon Allen starts working himself in early in the season. And then at the end of the season, we saw Isaiah Davis work himself into the conversation. If you have Breece Hall, you're probably not happy at all to see this. Would you be dissatisfied enough to start shopping him around and taking what you can, knowing that this situation potentially could get worse before it gets better?
So yeah, I think the Breece Hall situation is really ugly and gets complicated by they have a whole new staff, right? So they have Aaron Glenn comes in. They got the new OC. I forget his name, but he was the Detroit passing game guy, I think.
Yeah.
So like what they're going to do and how they're going to see it, I have no idea. If I have a team where I have like surplus running backs, one of which is Breece Hall, and somebody wants to pay market for Breece, totally good with that. So, but I'm not looking to shop him because he's uber talented. He's just a guy who's just too good to give up. Just because, quite honestly, you'd be giving him up because you were afraid, right? Like you're afraid that like something bad is going to happen. He's not going to get usage. The new coaching staff, Braylon Allen, it's just basically a fear-based like trade. And I don't want to do that. But right now I think he's going RB6 on like KCC. If like somebody offered me RT, like that kind of value, yeah, I would certainly consider it. In fact, one of my leagues, if they're watching, I have like one league where I'm actually heavy RB. I have him. I have like Bucky. I have a couple other guys. It's like, hey, somebody wants to come with an offer, fair market value for Breece or Bucky, I'm down.
Bucky Irving too.
Oh, 100%.
How much?
He's going RB7. If somebody offers me RB7,
yeah, no, I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
How many were you an investor into Bucky Irving last year at all?
Yeah, I was doing the spray and pray in the third round, right? Like just like probably like everybody else. So I've got, I've got Bucky, I got some Tyrone Tracy, but of course then I also got my fair share of Kamani Vidal and Audric Estime.
Yeah, well, nobody's perfect, right? Yeah.
So literally, I just do. So I'm kind of agnostic on these things, right? It's like so. It's just for me. It's like spray and pray, and then, and if they don't work out, then they're gone, and I try to find somebody else.
Yeah, I am looking at the keep trade cut right now. Hall is 6 and Bucky Irving is 7. What about the guy who's number 8, Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, so I don't think anybody's. So for me, that evaluation is less about like somebody's coming and taking it. It's just more a matter of, is the role really any good?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be either.
Yeah,
there's a lot that's undecided there.
Yeah, so for me, that's just more a matter of like, I don't know what I'd be buying into. Like I wouldn't be all that interested in JT with like Anthony Richardson at the helm at that price, right? I mean,
right.
If I have him, like again, I'm not like giving him away because he's a very talented dude, but they don't throw the ball to running backs. Like AR like is gonna vulture like his more than his share of touchdowns in the red zone. Like so, yeah. Yeah, that's why I wouldn't be picking on him either.
And if it is Richardson too as the quarterback, not only is he going to vulture touchdowns, but he is, and you already kind of mentioned it too. Like those running quarterbacks, a lot of times they'll just skip dumping it off to the running back and just take off.
Exactly.
Themselves.
Exactly.
Chris Olave is a player who is going to turn 25 this year. So still, well, coming into what should be his prime. He is unequivocally the number one receiver on his team. Now, granted, quarterback play is not great there. He's probably in the right division as far as shootouts in that NFC South. And yet, KTC has him as the wide receiver 26. Concussion history is not great. Do you see where people are valuing him right now as a spot where, hey, I should be getting more of this guy on my team because the upside here is worth it? Or are you kind of the opinion like, you know what, maybe this guy I need to get rid of because I can see this going south for him, not only from an injury standpoint, but from a team standpoint, I could see this going south for him in a couple of different ways really fast. How do you feel about Olave right now? What should we be doing?
So I'm overweight Olave across like my portfolio of teams, and the reason was because last year when I was grabbing orphans, there were guys that like I thought were undervalued that I wanted. So I'm overweight on Olave. I'm overweight Rashee Rice. There's a bunch of them that I'm overweight. That I go, oh, that didn't work out as good, but I like Olave. I like Olave at this price, so I would increase. So if I get a chance to get him at that price, I would take it. Like I'm not worried. So am I worried about Olave? Sure. But I'm way more worried about guys coming off of lower body injuries than I am about the guy with the head injury. I'm not like talking about him as a human being for his long term. I'm just talking about
as a dynasty team. Yeah, right? I get it. Yeah.
But in the end, because I know if he comes back and he's out there, there's no reason he's not going to be Chris Olave, right? Like all the other guys coming back from lower body stuff, I don't know how long is it going to be before Rashee Rice is Rashee Rice again, or Brandon Ayuk is Brandon Ayuk, or if Tank Dell is ever going to be Tank Dell, or Jonathan Brooks or any of these other guys coming back from lower body stuff. I have no idea. And the worst case, the thing is, if Olave gets hurt, he'll be out, and you can throw somebody else in the lineup. With Ayuk or Rashee Rice, they come back and they're not quite ready to go. And you get 5 or 6 weeks of subpar production. And then the whole time you're sitting there going, well, I got to start him now. You sit there, you go, I started him the last 2 weeks and he doesn't look quite right, but what am I going to do? Sit him now? So you're stuck with him, through whatever, growing pains.
I think the other thing to understand too, and you kind of pointed this out, concussion will knock him out and put him on injured reserve, and you can stuff him on your injured reserve. But for a guy who's dealing with trying to come back from an ACL or trying to come back from an Achilles or a nasty ankle injury or something like that, they could be active and you can't.
And they just underperform.
And they underperform, yeah. And then you don't know okay,
exactly
am I going to play this guy or not? And then he is taking up a roster spot for you.
Yeah, he's taking up a roster spot, and he may he's taking up a bench spot minimally, and he's maybe I'm stuck having to throw him in there because he appears like he's gonna. The problem will be he'll project right every week. Every week he's going to project to be one of your starters, but he's underperforming, and it takes a while before that catches up. And I hope Barney's right. I hope Barney's right.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, I don't have I think I only have Olave on one team. But obviously, I'm always rooting for health, and I'm rooting for players to stay healthy. Never get hurt anyone. I'd love it. Unless you're running back. Then I understand, listen, you might have to go down for my fantasy teams to be successful.
I don't wish it on you, but I know it's going to happen.
Right, that's what it is. I know it's going to happen, yeah.
And I'm with Barney, Olave, and I'm with you. Olave, the player, is awesome. He's a fun guy. So he's a fun guy to root for. So want to root for him. So I hope everybody's right. He's great.
The Packers passing game looked awesome at the end of 2023, Bill. Jordan Love was playing. No, I should say this. Nobody was playing better than Jordan Love at the end of the 2023 season. And that funneled down to the pass catchers on that team. 2024, quite frankly, I don't know what would have happened if Love does not get hurt in that first game against the Eagles, because I know he was dealing with that a good portion of the season. He was asked about this by the media several times, and you could tell he'd kind of grind his teeth and say, no, I'm good, I'm fine. But you really knew he wasn't completely fine like he was in 2023. The advantage that the Packers had this year was Josh Jacobs having a fantastic season, the Packers having one of the better run blocking offensive lines in the NFL, and they were able to ride Jacobs all the way to the playoffs, where they ultimately fell short to the world champions. My question to you is, in 2025, knowing that Love has a full offseason of health, knowing that Josh Jacobs is still there, and knowing that the news sounds good on both Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs from an injury standpoint, but Christian Watson, I think, you don't count on him at all in 2025. How close will the 2025 Packers offense come to being the 2023 version? Or are they going to end up being closer to what we saw this past year? And I guess this is mostly a question for you about just the pass catchers and Jordan Love from a dynasty standpoint. Where do we strike? Like, where is the iron hot here that we need to be striking at?
Yeah, so you got another one of those like sore spots for, like, Jaden Reed was another guy that was on my list of guys I was looking for last year when I was grabbing up my orphans list. So I had a bunch of Jaden Reed and Kraft, and like I used Dontavian Wicks as like a bonus upside guy. Like, he was last year's Jalen Coker, right?
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of those guys. Here's my problem. Like, my problem is the biggest mistakes I think we make in fantasy is when we think our job is to talk about what the coach should do, as opposed to what the coach is telling us he's going to do, right? Like, and then somehow we don't believe him. And then, like, we're shocked that, like, oh my God, like they brought in a bruising 3-down back. They said, we're going to run the shit out of the ball. And we were like, no way, you got Jordan Love. You got Jaden Reed. You got all these. No, you're going to throw the ball. And then lo and behold, yeah, no, they ran the ball.
They ran the ball.
And it's like Lucy with the football. Like, this year we're going to do it again. We're going to go, oh no. Like, this year, they're not going to just do that again. Like, I don't know. I said, literally, Jaden Reed falls in the category for me of, like, I'm overweight and I'm holding him because nobody's going to go, like, want him. But, like, again, to me, he's really talented. And so I just have to hold him and hope that, like, LaFleur decides, yeah, this, like, 3 yards in a, like, pile of, like, dust or a pile of AstroTurf is really not going to get me a Super Bowl win. So I'm going to have to figure something else out. But one other thing, though, to your point, though, like, about Jordan Love, like, I'm really thrilled to hear you say that. I'm not thrilled that he was hurt, but I'm thrilled because we hear that, like, basically every year, right? Where there's some guy underperforms, and then we find out in the offseason, it's like, oh yeah, he was really, really banged up. Like, he never shows up on the injury report at all, right? But the guy was never 100%. And, all the Twitter guys would have been watching the film during the year and going, he doesn't look quite right, but he's not on the injury report, so right. I guess he's okay. And so I'm happy to hear that, like, no, Jordan Love really wasn't okay.
Yeah, I think, and he would never admit to it, but I think the way he answered a lot of these questions, you could tell, like, yeah, this guy is not what he was before the injury. The other thing that I'll say that's aggravating about Matt LaFleur is he preaches about explosive plays, and that's one of the biggest things that you need to do to be successful in today's NFL. And yet, I don't want to say there's a lot of conservative stuff because he does call some aggressive plays from time to time, but for the most part, like, there are not a lot of explosive plays that are given the opportunity to live in Green Bay. This is the equivalent of the guy who prays to God for 20 years every night to win the lottery, and he never does. And finally, after 20 years, God replies back to him in prayer and says, meet me halfway, buy a lottery ticket. Right?
Exactly.
And so LaFleur wants to have these explosive plays. You got to kind of put your guys in position to have successful explosive plays. To your point, I think you're right. I think it's Jacobs again this year. We're going to have Marshawn Lloyd in Green Bay this year, who had a lost season this past year. I know the Packers still like him. And because he was hurt last year, we saw the rise of Emmanuel Wilson. We saw Chris Brooks, for God's sake, on a lot of game-winning two-minute drives instead of Josh Jacobs. So, there's no shortage of trust for the running backs the Packers have on their roster.
Your point is right. I mean, like, I didn't go back and look it up, but, like, I do remember the beginning of the year, like, Jaden Reed had, like, a couple early season monster games, right? And, like, they were all, like, explosive play-based stuff, but then somehow it all vanished. Like, and then the guy was, basically, on a milk carton somewhere with his pictures on a milk carton. I don't know what happened to him.
Let's go to YouTube right now. Corey Walters has a question in a Superflex rookie draft. As it stands right now, Bill, assuming Ashton Genty goes number 1 in the rookie draft, Superflex, who you're taking at 2? We talked about, I think we answered this question for single quarterback leagues before with Hampton. So we like Hampton a little bit better than McMillan, but do we like him better than Cam Ward, assuming Cam Ward is a top quarterback drafted?
So, I mean, to me, if Ward goes to one of the top 3 teams, like, and you take Cam Ward.
And even like just top 3 picks, like somebody else could trade up to one of those top 3.
Yeah, exactly. And then, if somebody trades up there, like for him, like you take Cam Ward.
Barney Newkirk agrees. I think that when we have a couple of seasons like we did last year from Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, my initial reaction is I've hit gold. I'm going to have a great receiver here for the next 8 to 10 years. And if I have either one of these guys, this is going to be awesome. However, there are some people, and I have fallen into this trap before too. And I think it's just doing your due diligence, is you have to look at, well, what if I'm wrong about this guy? What if it was just a 1-year thing for Malik Neighbors? What if it was just a fantastic rookie year from Brian? I think about Michael Clayton many years ago for Tampa, had that unbelievable rookie season. Everybody thought, hey, this guy's going to be awesome for Dynasty. Never even came close to having another good season after that. Now, both of these guys have much more significant draft capital than Michael Clayton. And I'm not comparing either one of these guys to Michael Clayton, although I think Clayton went to LSU as well. I could be wrong on that. I'd have to double check. If you were in the business of saying, you know what, maybe I should shop these guys. Maybe it's going to be a bad 2025, and now's the time to sell on it. This is the question I always have when I am pondering whether I should deal type guys like this. Can I get fair value for them? Can I get enough back in return for either one of these players? And if I can't, case closed, I'm keeping these guys for another year. Bill, how do you fall in on this?
If you have these guys, you have zero chance of getting fair value. It's like trading a superstar in the NBA. The team that trades him always ends up with the short end of the stick on the trade. You just can't, just because, I mean, a guy so Neighbors is startup draft is going to be like 3rd overall, probably he's going to 3rd. So in Dynasty, he's going in the Never-Too-Early or the Gorilla, he's going at the back end of the 1st. Well, in Dynasty,
I would say in Dynasty, the only guys who take ahead of him at least at receiver are Chase and Jefferson. That's it. Yeah,
that's it. Right. So, and in a 1 QB league, that's how it goes. It goes that order. Mm-hmm. And so, what does it cost to get the 3rd most valuable asset? It's 3 firsts, the equivalent of 3 firsts, mm-hmm. 2.5 to 3 firsts. And you're just not going to get that. Funny story to make the point. Last year I got an orphan, had what I wanted, and the 102 and the 104. And with the 102, I got Neighbors. And then somehow with the 104, the 103 wanted Rome. And so I took Bowers. So I ended up taking Neighbors and Bowers. Obviously, have a very good year, win that league. Guy sends me a trade offer last week. And so it was his 102, his 103, next year's 1st, and then 2 low end starting assets. And in the comment he puts hey man, I have to at least ask. Right. But he knows right. There's zero chance of this going on. And I didn't even run a calc on it, right? It's probably calc's okay, but no, there's zero chance I'm even looking at that. No, just absolutely no. And especially in our formats, because with the shallow benches and the shallow starting requirements, you have a guy like Neighbors or BTJ, you just never giving him up.
I would say Glenn Lowy, a longtime FFPC player, high stakes dynasty player, high stakes player. He's been on a couple of these shows, and he said something. I don't know if it was just so concise. It's always resonated with me. And he probably told me this 10 years ago, but he always says elite talent over everything else. And I think that's the mantra that you have to have in Dynasty. It's yes, you want to win your league. Yes, you want to win championships, but above all, you are trying to cultivate this team, this entity that never goes through mediocre seasons, that is never bad, and it can't if you have elite talent over everything else. And I think that is what is going to lead me into my next question here, Bill. Sean Siegel from RotoViz, Jake Rickroad, a longtime FFPC player, has said this as well. If you run your teams correctly, your dynasty teams correctly, you should never have to rebuild. You should never be in a situation where you have to rebuild these teams after they get too old or after they get too hurt or you made a couple of bad decisions. Now, there's been pushback on that. Some people say, no, I mean, you could be the best dynasty player in the world. Eventually, these teams will have to be rebuilt. Where do you fall in on this spectrum of quote unquote never having to rebuild a dynasty team?
I'm almost where Sean is. Like it's like I would describe it as never by choice. Like you know, like I never get there like based on like decisions. Like I'm not getting there by that. But like I have one team that's probably rebuilding because like my wide receiver group was Olave and Rashee Rice and Tank Dell and I forget I had Rashid Shaheed too, and I had like Deontay Johnson, which at the beginning of the year seemed okay, and then I had Jaden Reed, and so I had a bunch like that was my wide receiver crew, and it's like within like 6 weeks it was dust. I mean, literally all of them. But at the beginning of the year, I don't know, seemed okay.
So then in that situation, unless you are absolutely loaded at the other three positions, quarterback, running back, tight end, it is going to be a hard haul to have a successful year that year. But to your point, a lot of these were injuries that Jaden Reed wasn't really an injury, but like Rashid Shaheed, Tank Dell, like these guys, and maybe Tank Dell doesn't come back in 2025, but these guys should come back, right? So I think that I guess even the best dynasty player is not immune to injuries, but even if it's a one-off year, hopefully you shouldn't have to rebuild teams like this.
Yeah, and I think like some of it, I think where guys go bad, like so you see some of the orphans, and you talked about the orphans like in the intro, like when you guys have to post an orphan for $1, it's not that the orphan got bad because he had some really bad injury run, or even that he had like bad player takes. It's because like he had a combination of horrible player takes and terrible trading and has no draft capital. It's like there's just basically nothing. Like you're going to sit there for a year. You're not going to do anything. Like the owner's going to the guys who pick those up are going to have to spin what they can to try to get some future capital. Hope a couple of the young guys hit. Like it's not like. When you get to a place generally where you're in a full-blown rebuild, you effed up your trading really, really pretty bad.
Yeah. Or you're drafting too. I mean, like if it was a startup or like I can't count how many times Brian Thomas is a perfect example last year. Alvin Kamara, it happened with him. Even though Kamara, I guess, was part of a loaded rookie draft class. Odell Beckham, how we let these guys slip to the end of the first round, and then they have these supernova seasons. It drives me crazy, Bill, because anybody could have had them, and yet we let these guys who were the successful dynasty players who went deep in the postseason, and then they end up reloading their team like that. It drives me crazy. And then the guys at the opposite end are screwing things up in the top 4 pick, kind of like the NFL draft. The reason that these teams are screwing it up is because they're not well run. And because they're not good, and then they screw up these picks in the NFL draft, and it sets their franchise back 10 years. I mean, look at the Jets, look at the Titans, look at the Jaguars too. I mean, like all these teams that are consistently up there, they're up there for a reason.
I mean, like if you just look at last year's draft, like if you were a bad team, you got a top 8 pick. You could almost, the only way you got unlucky is if you took Jonathan Brooks. Everybody else is fine. The problem is most of these bad teams, they had already traded away their first.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And they didn't get anything. They traded away for some dust. And now they had some magic beans that they got and no first. And now a good team is sitting there grabbing an extra guy up front.
I am confident in my chops as a dynasty player, Bill. And even I am very skittish anytime somebody is coming after a first round pick from me. And like, I'm like, do I really want to give this up? Is this really the right move? Like, I am very, very cautious with second round, third round, fourth round, whatever. It doesn't matter. First round, I'm still very, it's like my firstborn kid, right? Like, I cannot screw this up. Not that to say I could screw it up with my other kids after my firstborn, but like this, that is, it holds a special place in my heart. Do I overvalue it? Yeah, probably sometimes. But that's something that like, I cannot remember the last time I traded a future first. It's just, it's not the way I like to do business. Perhaps it's my Green Bay Packer fandom, because they almost never trade their first round pick. They're almost always using it. And so like, I feel like I should be in the draft and develop plan as well. But draft and develop doesn't always work in Dynasty.
I mean, but Wanke, I don't think you're wrong, man. Like, trading the future first should be something that you do with great care.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, trading your current year first, like, is not the same to me, because like, you can see what you're going to get and you can see where you're going to be, right? Like, the trading the future first, the problem is if you're wrong, like when you traded it, like, now you're dead.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
now you're just dust.
Yeah.
It, you know, like, it didn't work out and you got no way to come back. So like, yeah, no, I think you should be cautious. I literally, I told you guys, I traded one.
I think and I'm glad this happened when it happened to me at the time. I was super ticked. But one of the first years I was playing Dynasty fantasy football, I played in a league where I was pretty confident. Like, I was in the top half of like, am I one of the best players or not? I don't know if it was one of the best, but I was in the top half. And I was trading with a guy who I didn't think was very good. I thought he got lucky his first year in the league to go as far as he did. And he had the 10, I can't remember what it was, the 110 or it doesn't matter what pick he had. He wanted my first round pick. And I was on the clock. And I traded it for his first rounder next year, because I was so sure that this guy was going to have a bad season.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm like, well, I got to sit on this for a year without a pick, but that's okay. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was still green behind the ears when it came to Dynasty. So I traded that 108. I can't remember who he picked. And then we played out the league, and he ended up getting the 9th overall pick the following year. So I had to wait a year.
And that, yeah,
and I moved down one slot. That's so I've learned from that, and I'm glad it happened to me, because now I like, once I've been bitten by the snake, I tend not to get too close to the rattler. You know, like I stay away, because I know it can happen. And again, that can be cautious to my own fault, and maybe it doesn't always serve me right. But these are the things we have to weigh.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when you start talking about dealing with first, like, yeah, you should be thoughtful about it. Like, you shouldn't just be tossing them around.
Right. Yeah. No. And I definitely.
And some guys do.
Some guys do, for sure. And that's I can't live life like that.
No, me neither.
Not the way. But if you want to play Dynasty that way, hey, it's your team. More power to you. Last question. I don't know how you're going to answer this, quite frankly, but I always ask Dynasty players this time of year about it. Is there even a player, Bill, that you're trying to acquire on a bunch of your Dynasty teams right now? We talked a little bit about Olave. I don't know if he would qualify for this, where you're trying to get him everywhere. I don't know if there is a player that you're trying to get everywhere. If there is one, who would it be? And then if there's a player that you are looking to dump, maybe at less than 100 cents on the dollar, just because you see a bad year coming, who would that player be?
So on the players I'm trying to get, like, I'm going to make it players, because it's easier to talk about. Like, I went out and grabbed some more orphans this year, because there were guys that I was underweight on that, like, I wasn't comfortable being underweight on. Like, I didn't want to go through a whole season of watching Scott Hansen cut to some game and I go, oh shit, not again. Right. Like, so I just didn't want that. So guys that I went to go prioritize for my orphans, like, I wanted more Brian Thomas Jr. I only had one share, just based on the way, like, not because of what any player take I had, just by the way things fell. Like, so I got one share, and like, yeah, I didn't want that. Like, I didn't have much. I only had one share of Jahmyr Gibbs. I didn't want that. Like, I only had like one share of Jackson Smith-Njigba. Like, I didn't want that. Like I wanted to get more Rome. So I was looking to get like some there. So I basically was getting orphans to try to get those guys. And the other one, and the most important, was I wanted some 101s because I didn't want to spend the next 3 years having to fade Aston Genty. Like it just didn't seem like this is supposed to be fun. And it didn't seem like watching Red Zone week after week, watching Aston Genty do something stupidly amazing and me having none of them would be fun. Yeah. So I was prioritizing getting the 101s so I could like make sure that I had some shares. Because I had one share and I got that like through a very fortunate trade. Here's an example. Like, so guy traded me, he was making a playoff push. Guy traded me his 101. He needed running backs desperately for Ramondre Stevenson. So he traded me his future first for Ramondre. Doesn't make the playoffs, but he has a very good team, sweeps the loser bracket, and ends up with the 101. So I ended up with my only 101 because it was like the only team I didn't make the playoffs in. I ended up with the 101 for Ramondre, which turned out like obviously to be good. And cautionary tale on why you don't trade your future first, because it can end up really bad. So those are the things I was looking to try to get. And quite honestly, going back to our earlier conversation, I don't think you can buy Brian Thomas Jr. Like if you make offers, like you can't get them. The only way you can get them is if you're gonna like trade, Gibbs or Bowers or Bijan or something like that. Like you just can't get them. Like,
do you find yourself when you're looking to pick up dynasty leagues, you're literally looking for, okay, where are the Thomas teams? Where are the just Smith and Jigba teams? That's what you're doing.
100%. 100%. Like so for me, I have a structure that I prefer. Like, so I'm looking at the structure and then the structure first, and then I look for the players. Like if I don't see one of those guys, like, yeah, I'm not like, could be a fun team, but like, I don't need it. So yeah, I'm like looking at those guys.
I always share this story too. This happened to me this past year, Bill. It doesn't really, I mean, it has something to do with dynasty. There's no actionable advice here. I was watching football with my kid on Sunday, week 14, and I'm checking at the scores. One of my private dynasty leagues I'm in, I have Lamar Jackson, I have Brock Purdy. I forgot to start Brock Purdy over Lamar Jackson that week. Lamar Jackson was on a bye. Cost me about 20 some points. I don't remember exactly. But it not only cost me, and Barney Newkirk, by the way, who's watching tonight, is in this league, so he knows what I'm talking about. But I played Lamar Jackson. In fact, I think I might have been playing him that week too.
Oh my God!
And so I ended up losing that game. We play in victory points in that league, so I lose out on the victory point for I would have the 2 victory points I would have won, and then the 1 victory point for scoring in the middle of the pack and it kept me out of the playoffs. I would have been the 6th seed in the playoffs, and instead I was out right away. So now this is looking bad. So I send a note to the commissioner. I say, hey, I just want to let you know I wasn't tanking here. Like this,
I'm just a dumbass.
Mistake. Like it's just an idiot. Like too many leagues, whatever. Well, I don't have too many leagues. I just made the stupid decision to ignore that. Yeah, no problem. So I end up marching through the consolation bracket and I win it, which means I have the 101 this year. If I would have made the playoffs, I followed it out because it's like total points in the playoffs. I would have finished second. I would have been the runner up. And I'm like, I often think about this. I'm like, what would I have rather had? The runner up where I'm guaranteed second place, or Ashton Genty for the rest of his career. And as weird as it is, I'm like, I think I'm glad I missed the playoffs and got Genty. Now that could change. I mean, we'll see what kind of player Genty is, but this is one of the things I sit up at night when I can't fall asleep. I'm like, what was the right move? Like, not that I, made the move intentionally. I didn't. But what would be the right way? Like,
would I pay this money?
Should I be happy about this? Is basically what it is.
Yeah, it's like, would I pay 2 or 2.5 entry fees for Ashton Genty?
Right,
like,
exactly. I don't know. I still don't know. Okay, last question tonight. Rubio's going to give it to us in the YouTube chat room. What's your guys' thoughts on Brandon Ayuk after the Deebo Samuel trade? I heard they are willing to move him too, but are they really that strapped for money, or is he hurt? Now, he is hurt. He's obviously coming off the ACL, so maybe he's not hurt, but he's recovering. They do have to find the money to pay Brock Purdy. They're paying Bosa a ton of money. He could be a guy that's either traded or cut. So the Niners do have some, and they're paying McCaffrey all this money. So and Kittle too. So they are paying these guys quite a bit of money right now. My initial opinion about Samuel being moved is it's not like I'm bumping Ayuk up at all. I think the guy I bump up most in San Francisco now that Samuel's gone is probably Pearsall. That's the guy that I think I'm really excited for year 2.
Yeah. So for me, I think as it relates to Ayuk, 2 things, right? First was, I think we kind of all collectively knew like that Debo was moving on, right? So I don't think I think the market had already recognized that, at least as it relates to Ayuk. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know that it factors it in enough for Pearsall or Jennings. I think I can double check, but I'm pretty sure I just grabbed. No, I 100% know. Like, I'm in a never-too-early slow. Mm-hmm. I timed it so that I would be like there while the combine was going. So literally the news broke while it was like I was 2 picks away or something. When the news broke that Debo was traded, the guy in front of me took Ayuk, and then I grabbed Juwan Jennings, because I think that's where following what they're telling you, right? They re-signed Jennings, they like him, right? He's been productive, and he's cheap. If you tried to go get Ayuk now in Dynasty, you're probably going to have a hard time. Nobody wants to let him go, really, because the dream is there, right? You paid a lot for him. You lost him all last year. Guys are going to hold on. I would, and Pearsall is like the mystery box. He could be anything. He could even be Juwan Jennings, right? And so I'm just kind of if I get a chance to, especially for us in FFPC land, cut down time, nobody's cutting Juwan Jennings, but he may be just above a cut line. And the guy does if you make an offer for Juwan Jennings and it allows him to save somebody else that he kind of also really would like to keep too, you might be able to go get yourself some Juwan Jennings or maybe Pearsall. But yeah. I would be leaving Ayuk alone. Plus, the thing is, Ayuk's coming back from an injury. He wasn't himself the first part of last year after he missed training camp. I'm just not going to pay market price. Although his price isn't really that bad. He's around wide receiver 30 or something maybe.
No, it's not that bad, but I feel like it's going to get lower. And so I don't think now is the right time to be buying on Ayuk. I think you wait on this. You wait till he's slow coming back and he's
that's fair.
And he's not practicing or he's not doing everything at training camp. And that's when I think you could really get, because nobody wants to, who wants to have Ayuk on their team at the start of the season where he's still behind everybody. You can't play him. And knowing that when he does come back, you may not want to play him for multiple reasons. Maybe it's going to take him all this season to try to get back. Maybe George Kittle and Pearsall and Jennings and McCaffrey, they have all these other targets on this team. Maybe he doesn't get enough targets. It's not like he's a target funnel on that team. So I think if you want to acquire Ayuk, I'm with you right now. Now's not the time, but I think you could wait even more.
I think that's right. Well, because I think right now he gets a bump, and I think you're right. If there's any news at all come training camp that he's starting off on the pup or he's some othe way categorized, you'll be able to get him for nothing.
Yeah.
Not for nothing, but the price will be down.
It will be down. Listen, I have no idea what's going on right now, but I'm willing to bet that the reports out of San Francisco is Ayuk is on schedule. He's expected to be ready to go. And then once training camp rolls around, he's not doing everything. He's on the preseason pup. And then I don't know what's going to happen after that. So
plus, just as a reminder, although it's fresh in everybody's mind, this is the same organization that we found out on Monday night at 8:00 that Christian McCaffrey has like a calf or it's Achilles pull or some shit, right? So you wouldn't trust anything that they say.
You can't. And listen, I get there's Adam Schefter came out and said this. He was standing next to 49ers higher ups on the sideline that night that expected McCaffrey to go, and even they were surprised. They were taken aback when he didn't go. But at the same time, I can't just ignore okay, well, this is your franchise guy here, and you didn't know, you didn't have any kind of inkling, you didn't make any preparation for this. The thing that always irritates me about McCaffrey is I had him in 3 or 4 leagues, but one of the leagues I had him in, was a league I shared with my son. First year, he's 11 years old. First year playing fantasy football, gets the 101. And we take McCaffrey, and it was a slog. Like we made the playoffs. I think we were like the 4 seed, and we got eliminated in the first round or whatever. But like to do what we did, saddled with McCaffrey, that the McCaffrey mule all season doing nothing for us, I was pretty proud of. I don't think he understands how hard we grinded to get to where we did. But now I don't know if he wants to play anymore because he's so sick about the McCaffrey thing. And I am with him too. And
so I'll give you mine. So like, since we're doing like Christian McCaffrey 101 story. So I had, I do one of my main events with one of my sons and his best buddy.
Yep.
So we drafted the year before. We ended up winning our league. We got like the 11 because I was on a string where in 23 I was just getting 11s and 12s every time. This one we got the 101. We were dying. We sat here okay, we're taking Christian McCaffrey. Oh yeah, this is great. And then of course you build the rest of your team as if Christian McCaffrey is going to be a stud. So you don't take another running back forever, right? And then like literally we're texting each other on the game. It's like, well, this was fun. Like, okay, that was fun because you're trying to win the 500,000. Like you don't take a whole bunch of other mediocre backs. Like, no, I've got Christian McCaffrey, and then I'm loading up on wide receiver. I'm taking whatever. Like, yeah, no, that was not fun.
And then it was a matter of like chasing like all season. Like you're trying to churn these running backs and trying to catch lightning in a bottle. And then by the way, as soon as you catch lightning in a bottle, that lightning would end, and then you'd have to find the next. It was a pain.
Yeah, I like you probably know we talked in the past. Like I grind the wire like a savage. Like I'm relentless on grinding the wire because I think there's an advantage there. I ground all year on that team. Didn't matter. Just could never catch anything. Couldn't catch a thing.
It just stinks. It stinks. And on that,
it happens. Part of the game.
And on that, it is part of the game. On that wonderful note, we'll put a button on this podcast. This was a lot of fun tonight, Bill. It always is hanging out with you, talking shop. At Bill Wanke on X, a guy who won 10 leagues last year and is out for maybe more this year, with the goal being for you and I to do a show together in January.
Exactly.
When you're counting that $1 million, man, that's the plan. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Appreciate you, and good luck this season, my friend.
Great time. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. That is Bill Wanke, ladies and gentlemen. Mayor is dead to me on the FFPC. That is his username, Bill Wanke on the X, BILLWANKE. That will complete our show for tonight, an extended one. But listen, once we get going, sometimes these things happen. Want to remind everybody to play the FFPC Never-Too-Early best ball tournaments, pick up Dynasty Orphans, and play the Big Gorilla tournament for $1 million today. All those are going on right now at myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live. Next show will be Tuesday, April 1st at 10 p.m. Eastern time. That's the next time the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown goes live. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network is live this Thursday. Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros was going to be my guest co-host. He actually had to bow out because he's doing another show that night that he forgot about. So I am busy getting a guest. We'll get a good industry pro dynasty guy on that program. Or woman on that program on Thursday night for you for 2 full hours of nothing but dynasty fantasy football goodness. And of course, the HSMF Hour is live this Friday at 10 p.m. Farrell Elliott, the commissioner of the KFFSC, is going to be joining me. And we will be speaking with 12-time FFPC Dynasty winner Bill Rahor, who is going to be our champion. He's going to be our guest that night. That's going to be a lot of fun. All those shows on the FFPC YouTube, FFPC Facebook, FFPC X accounts. You can watch them live there. Thank you so much for watching. For Bill Wanke, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. We'll talk with you again on April 1st. Thank you for listening to the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on iTunes under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email, rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think, and follow us on Twitter at RotoVizRadio. And remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount through the NFL podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast.